Morning, Emily. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
How are you? I'm just managing the waiting room here.
All right.
A bunch of folks kind of jumping in here, so I'll admit them as they pop in. How's everybody doing today?
Good. Good.
Good.
How about
George, how are you?
Good.
Good.
I got a hot lead.
Outstanding. That's the best kind.
I got one from, I gave my card to a Masonic brother who lives in, who works at King's Food Market in Hillsdale,
Nice.
and he gave it to a coworker.
Okay. Good. That's exciting. And
Trying to get her
it's a hot lead
pre-approved.
too, huh?
Yeah, trying to get her pre-approved.
Good. Hey guys, just a couple quick things when we get started in just a second here. I did want to let you know that I am recording these, and so if you missed the first session, there is now on the Keller Williams Bergen County Partners YouTube channel, there is a playlist for Ignite 2.0. And so the session from Monday has been uploaded in there, and you can go back and watch that, and I'm recording this as well. So in this series, anything that you've missed, just circle back around and you can watch that video. Or if you hear something that you want to go back and revisit that again, that should be, today's session should be up on that channel by the end of the day. All right. All right, good deal. So as I'm just having people join here and I'm managing this waiting room, which is a little time consuming in the very front end. Give me some gratitude. Tell me something good. I'd like to get some positive energy to start all of these sessions. So George, I think you've got some gratitude in terms of that new hot lead. Anybody else have some gratitude to share or something that they're grateful for in their world before we get going here?
This is Andrew Rice. I just got another referral from my church, actually.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Outstanding. Good. Anybody else? You know, they say that gratitude is kind of the highest form of energy that there is out there. And so I think it's always a great practice to just, with all the stuff that's going on in our worlds right now, and some of it we're not super excited about, but just to find that energy that you can tap into someplace where you can find gratitude in your world and build it out from there. It's just a great way to go. Anyway.
I'm grateful that I got a referral from a past client, and I'm taking this past client out to lunch today after this call.
Very nice. I bet they're grateful too. All right, so I'm going to jump into the PowerPoint, guys, and again, I'm going to be with one eye for a minute or two here on the waiting room. But that said, let me get a screen share going. This is the screen for the slideshow. You should be able to see that. If you can, just give me a quick thumbs up. If you can't tell me, that should be the PowerPoint for today. And this is lead generation. And so we're going to go back to the whole model of Ignite. Remember, if you weren't here last time, it's broken into two sessions, right? The first half of Ignite is called Sparks. And those 8 or 9 sessions are really focused around kind of growing your business, the things that you need to do to get momentum and to get started and to get a spark going. And once you've kind of got that spark lit, the second half of the series is called Elements or Elementals, right? The things that we do to kind of grow our business and to keep it going. And what we said, and you're going to see this, we're going to begin every session with these things. What do successful agents do every day? We're going to keep driving this point. They grow their business and they run their business. And a lot of what we're doing today is on the grow your business side, lead generating for buyers and sellers, making listing presentations to get buyers and sellers, and to preview real estate. Remember, one of the tasks that I'm asking you to do while you're in Ignite, and really forever, you know, top agents know their inventory. They preview every single week, every single day. They're looking at things as they come onto the market, both online and they're getting out in person. But successful agents do these things every single day. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about is revolving around these. So here's what we're focusing on today. We're going to talk about lead generation. And, you know, that's really the topic calls for. Lead generation is the core of your business, right? In another class that I was teaching earlier in the week, there was a quote from Gary Keller that said, until you have enough quality leads, then nothing else matters, right? The 3 L's of real estate are not location, 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 believe it or not. The 3 L's of real estate are leads, listings, and leverage. And leads are the base of that triangle, right? And in terms of leads, not all leads are equal. Listing leads are more valuable to your business than buyer leads are. And while we need buyers, and at the end of the day, buyers are the ones spending the money. And so if we don't have buyers, we don't have a market. Having inventory without buyer demand is meaningless. But we generate listing leads because the listing leads put us in the pathway of meeting the buyers. Through the marketing of our listings is how the buyers emerge in our business, right? So it's leads, listings, and leverage. See a couple more people popping into the chat, into the waiting room here. I'm trying to let those guys in. So here's the model. Here's the big picture. This is what I want you to sort of see. This is the lead gen model, and it looks like a big funnel, and it is kind of like a big funnel. At the very top here of the funnel is, how are we capturing leads? How are we getting people into our world? And if you look at it, the first phase here of lead generation is really looking at our techniques of prospecting and marketing, which we will talk about throughout this course. How are we going to use prospecting and marketing strategies to get people into our universe, right? Now, if you were with us on Monday, do you remember the exercise that we did with your cell phone? And what I asked you to do is to open up the contacts in your cell phone and to scroll all the way to the bottom of that list and simply count how many names do you have in your cell phone? Because what research tells us is about 6% of the population is going to be involved in a real estate action every year, 6%. So if you had 100 people in your cell phone, conceivably 6 of those folks are going to have a real estate action this year, and they're already in your world. Now to what level of relationship do you have, right? What we said last time was many of us don't necessarily know everybody who as well as we think we do. But the point of the matter is this: our world is limited to begin with. What most researchers will say, sociologists will say, that most people probably tap out somewhere at about 100 to 150 relationships that they would define as close relationships, right? Most people find that somewhere between 100 and 150 is where we tap out. That's just kind of the way that we social group as a species. And so we need, in a business model, to expand that. And we do that through prospecting and marketing. And once we capture those leads, then we're going to really work them in the database, right? And we're going to do a module on database management, I think, next. And remember the language that we're talking about here in Command. And what the language says is that leads and contacts are different things. And the language can be a little confusing. So we're going to unpack a little bit today that leads are people that we have kind of a one-way relationship with, contacts a two-way relationship. But once we've captured their information and they're in our database, now we have to stay connected with them. And what we do is we cultivate those folks, and they move through this sales pipeline, if you will. And through the cultivation, through nurturing, through getting a commitment to what's the next step in the process for you, then we begin to have folks who raise their hand and say, you know what, I do need a realtor. I am one of those people that is going to have a real estate action this year, right? And so then at that point, in the language of Command, right, our database language, we call those opportunities. We take those people, we put them into the opportunities section of our database, and we work them through even a little bit further. How do we move you through this process of getting closer and closer to taking that step? But it all starts here with this. If we don't start filling the funnel with lead generation, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter what profession you're in. You could be a doctor, you could be a lawyer, you could be a realtor, you could be whatever, you could be a carpenter or a plumber. If you don't have leads, you're not in business. And we spend so much time kind of perfecting our craft without really recognizing that the thing that we have to perfect more than anything else is our lead gen, right? So this is the model that we're going to unpack today, right? This is the lead generation model. Okay, any questions about that before we move on real fast? You can either throw a question into the chat box or you can unmute yourself if you like to. If not, we'll move forward. So let's start with prospecting. and marketing, right? The very first phase of this. You know, what we say is your lead generation is a combination of prospecting and marketing, and it really is a combination. I think a lot of times people think of lead gen only as prospecting, and they're different, prospecting and marketing. How do you understand the difference? I'd love somebody to unmute themselves or write in the chat box. How do you understand the difference between prospecting and marketing? I'd love to hear someone just kind of, there's no right or wrong here. I just want to get a sense of your understanding.
I think prospecting is more of an active thing that you're doing yourself, speaking, listening, and then marketing might be a little more passive in terms of advertising and maybe having a Facebook lead gen page set up.
Yeah, you know, Andrew, I think that's a really good way to think about it is active versus passive. And I like to think sometimes of the gold rush days back in California when people were flocking out to the West to try to find gold, and these prospectors were kind of kneeling in the side of a stream with a pan, and they were panning for gold. And in doing that, they would just get a big pan full of mud and they would wash it off in the stream, and they would try to see if there are any nuggets of gold in there. And when you think about that, then you're getting your hands dirty, man. You're active, you're muddy, it's kind of a messy process, prospecting at times. But that's different than marketing. Marketing is more attracting. Marketing is more kind of attracting people in. And when we think of lead gen, many times we don't really recognize how important marketing is. Because what we say is your business lead gen should be prospecting based, meaning you've got to be active. You've got to be going out there and kind of getting dirty, getting your hands dirty. But if you're not doing the marketing too, your prospecting is going to be too hard, or it's going to be harder. And what do I mean by marketing enhanced? Well, you know, marketing gives you a reason to prospect. Give me an example, someone, of how your marketing actions could give you a reason to follow up and prospect. Anybody have some thoughts around how that could look? I could send a newsletter, which is a passive marketing piece. I could send a just listed or just sold card to announce a new listing, which is a passive marketing piece. But once someone has received that, it gives me an opportunity to call them up or to knock on their door and say, hey, I'm the guy who sent you that thing. Did you get it? Do you have any questions about it? Marketing sometimes sets up your prospecting. And in fact, when you really look at professional marketing companies, especially when it comes down to in the sales arena, that's kind of the preferred strategy, is to send a marketing outbound piece first and then follow it up with a prospecting touch, because the marketing piece creates a little bit of familiarity. And that's the other thing to think about in terms of how marketing enhances your business. There is this thing in social psychology that we call the mere exposure effect. And what the mere exposure effect says is that merely by being exposed to something again and again and again, we begin to develop a sense of familiarity to it, right? It becomes familiar to me. And that's why marketing is about repetition, right? It's about hearing that same message again and again and again, driving down the highway and seeing big Ron Dukansky's head on every flipping billboard and every bus and every train, robsellshomes.com, right? Guaranteed, NJ, whatever it is, right? We've been saturated with those things because there's something really fascinating that happens through exposure, is that there's a tipping point where when you've been exposed to a message or an image or a marketing idea enough times, you actually begin to develop a preference for it. Saturation in marketing actually creates a preference for it. And so the way that marketing enhances your prospecting is if you pick an area that you're going to market into, and people see your message and they see your brand and they see your marketing again and again and again. When you show up as a prospector, you're not a stranger to them. And if you're not a stranger to me, I'm going to be less resistant to you, because we also know that there's this other thing in psychology called human bias, right? We have biases. And one of the unfortunate biases that people have is that they don't particularly trust strangers. And another bias business-wise for us is they don't particularly trust salespeople. And so if I'm trying to show up and prospect and get you to like me and get you to trust me, it's going to be far more effective if I prospect into an area that I have been marketing. And then what happens is I show up and the mirror exposure effect creates a preference for me. And then suddenly when I show up and I prospect, you are more apt to respond to my message. So it's both. It's prospecting and marketing. And as a coach, a lot of times what we think is lead generation is just picking up the phone, smiling and dialing, making calls. And it is that. I think that if you really want to have success, those calls are going to be warmer calls, meaning they're not total strangers, which means you have to market first, right? But that's where this is. It's a combination of both. And so make sure as you schedule your lead generation time blocks that some of that time block should be to take care of your marketing work, because it's part of the process, right? It's part of lead generation. So we do both of these and we capture these leads. Any questions around prospecting and marketing before we go on a little bit? I think about, and I'll leave it with this, and then I have a video to share with you. My wife and I do some gardening. If you've been on my Facebook page, you'll probably see a lot of food and you'll probably see a lot of flowers. But what happens is this: when you're planting and you buy a new flower or a new bush or whatever it is, you can spend a lot of money on plants and put them in the ground. And if you haven't prepared the soil, if you haven't sort of turned over the soil and broken it up, if you hadn't added the right nutrients into the soil, and for certain plants even to make sure that you have the right pH balance in the soil, you're going to put that plant into the ground and it's not going to thrive. You have to prepare the soil for the plant to really do well. Marketing is preparing the soil. Prospecting is doing the work, right? So that's how those two fit together. Okay, let's move along here. I actually have a video here that I want to share with you. So stick with me for a minute and hopefully you'll be able to see this video. Let's see if I can find it. Hold on. I got to get the video here. Now let's see if I can find it. Share screen. Can you see this guy? Can you see this guy on the screen? Looks a little bit like he might have not had a haircut during COVID-19. Can you all see him?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is a little video here on prospecting that I just want to share with you. It actually runs about 8 or 10 minutes, but I am going to kind of play this and run the whole thing through. So let's take a listen.
Lead generation is the first thing you should do.
Make those calls.
I took what I already knew and how I would go and shop for a house and just applied it to them.
It's a numbers game, you know. If you can track how many people you're calling in a day and how many hours you're doing this, there's a formula.
Make those calls.
I used those things that I did innately to attract my clients. I became a hyper-local expert in the military because I am a military spouse. The two key things that I did to generate the most success for me were social media and open houses, because I didn't have the database that everybody else did. So I had to find ways that I could get in front of people fast, and also something that would be maybe have the buyer or seller would be ready and willing to buy now versus later. And I'm lead generating specifically in an area that is military friendly, military heavy. It really is in the follow-up. Be present in their lives, build a relationship. Don't just ask for business every single time you see them. Be present in their lives, build the relationship. The least effective marketing activities for me were cold calling. And that's just because my niche market, they're not going to be already local. They're going to be moving from other bases. Then I decided, well, if I'm going to leverage cold calling, let's do it more purposeful, and let's do it only in my niche market where I know that there's military there. They're likely to buy or sell in 3 to 4 years. Mindset was a huge part of my success. One of the things I tell myself for an open house is one good lead every time. And so I start that action at least a week beforehand. I do a social media campaign. I follow up with all the likes and comments. And then I do a door knock around the open house. And then I follow up with anybody who is active at the open house. And usually that results in at least one buyer or seller leads, usually more.
So my first year, obviously, you know, the minute I made the change, it's super scary. I've got a network of people still reaching out to me to, you know, help them with what I was doing before, which was post-production. And I knew that my job in the beginning of the year, starting out, was changing people's mind from thinking if they met somebody who needed a commercial made, they thought of me. I knew my job was to change all the people who knew and trusted me when they heard somebody needed to buy a house or sell their house, they thought of me. You know, if you're starting out and you don't have that network, be really intentional about where you spend your time. You go get gas, you can meet somebody who needs to buy a house. Just think that way, and you'll attract that to yourself. I think everybody likes to talk about real estate. Your job is for people to know that you are in real estate and that they will bring it up. Open houses are by far just the best thing you should do out of the gate every weekend, each day. Starting out, I did door knocking, I did mailing. I didn't get a great return, but I wouldn't change that if I was starting out again. I would door knock. It's just talking to people, getting rejected. You know, it's great experience no matter what. I'll also say that the most important thing is that your lead generation strategy is coming from a place of authenticity. You're not going to get every client in the city, but there are people out there that are going to resonate with who you are, and just figure out a way to bring value. The income is secondary. That's how I go about it, and I think that really resonates with obviously my set of people that I take care of.
My lead generation strategies in the beginning were a challenge. I actually honestly believed when I first started that lead generation was cold calling and door knocking. So I kind of stayed away from that. I was fearful, I was anxious. But over the course of the business, the things that were innate to me, networking, open houses, facilitating classes, it allowed me the opportunity to connect. And I start to see that as opportunities for lead gen. And it was far more effective for me because it was natural. Let me just go back. When I became a new agent from the time that I was in Ignite and graduated from Ignite in October, November, December, I closed with 8 transactions in just 3 months. And during that period of time, I noticed a developmental gap. And I say this to say, I was spurred to partner and collaborate with some other agents and create master classes, as well as Launch and Learns monthly to share, mindset, motivational speaking. And through this, I was able to build a community, or I was able to build a group and a network broader than myself that basically helped others in home buying and also with other agents to help build their skill sets. It has put me and set me apart from other agents. Lead gen pitfalls that I've seen agents do are just being cookie cutter, looking at a successful agent or looking at someone else and doing exactly what they do doesn't necessarily work for everyone. Scripts gave me more confidence to be able to know what to say when I was talking to certain clients. Also, there's different approaches to different questions that may be asked. So instead of looking at scripts as, oh, I have to memorize this verbatim, it was a resource to gain knowledge and definitely helped me to build confidence, even though I was not planning on using it verbatim. I've always said my purpose is to empower and to elevate others to a level of excellence. And when I meet with my clients, I want to make sure that they have enough information and they feel empowered to make the decision. How can I do that? How can I help you to make you feel that once we've made this connection, you are elevated?
With my time blocking, for the first 2 hours of every day, I would do lead generation. And sometimes it would be 4 hours if I wasn't getting the productivity that week that I wanted. And then I followed up with all of my clients and learned just lots of very successful habits at night. I think that a lot of new agents want to try all different types of lead generation. You're not really honing any talent in 1 or 2 different lead generation. There's all kinds of different models, but they are not made for everybody. The best lead generation model for me was my sphere. I called my sphere every day. The number 2 way that I got business and did lead generation was open house. I found for me the best way to connect to be in front of them. People I already knew that I had built a relationship with, where I had met at an open house and I had time to actually connect with them. The scripts that the Ignite program provided for me really worked because they helped me get out of my comfort zone when I was having to call everybody in my Facebook and let them know that I had transitioned job, what I was doing, and it gave me the dialogue to ask. On our team, we have picked 6 nonprofits locally that we like. And we do an event with local nonprofits every year. And we meet lots of new people that way. We invite all of our former clients. We invite our vendors, and then we invite the neighborhood. We go door knocking for the event around the park doing it. So then we also have client appreciation. We try to do that quarterly. We'll do a client appreciation event where we invite everybody out to a restaurant and then we provide appetizers and just have fun. It's not necessarily a salesy event. It's just about having fun. By being out in the community, they see that we are knowledgeable about what we're doing, but we're also giving back. We care about where we live.
Our first year as a realtor, I tried just about everything in terms of prospecting and lead generation. What I found for me was that I present best when I'm face-to-face with somebody. So I really focused on open houses and then networking and getting out for coffees, making myself visible in the community, and then always making sure that I was able to speak to what was happening in the market at any time. So keeping up to date with local news and projects in and around town, I found to be very helpful when talking with people. To set myself apart from the many other agents out there, I've been utilizing video. And I find that putting the videos out on Facebook and a YouTube channel, and then even emailing them to clients really allows people to feel like they get to know you. And I've had experiences where I've talked to people on the phone, and they were, especially with out-of-town investor clients, and they were not necessarily ready to go with me until I sent them a video saying hello, outlining how I could help them. It was good to have the phone call with them, etc. And the feedback I've gotten on the videos has been very, very strong. The biggest pitfalls I saw other agents having, and even fell into myself with lead generation, was not having consistent follow-up. So if I had an open house and I got some names and numbers of contacts and told them I'd be in touch with them, sometimes I would get overwhelmed and I wouldn't touch base with them in a timely manner, or to follow up on calls with somebody that had shown some interest. Making sure that you stay on top of things and follow up with your contacts is very important. Scripts are great for understanding what objections you might encounter and how to overcome those objections. What I discovered was I would learn what the foundation of the script was. What was it trying to get me to say? And then I would be able to, just by knowing that and having read it over and over and over, when I would have an objection come up, I was able to utilize those scripts, the content of the scripts, in my own words.
Alrighty, there you have it. Lots and lots to unpack in this video, but let's just start. You know, that last guy, by the way, David Bain, I believe he was the Keller Williams Rookie of the Year a couple years back. In his first 12 months, I believe he closed as a solo agent just under 80 transactions. Not a bad first year, right? But let's just talk a little bit about that video, because there was a lot in there. And let's just open it up. Unmute your mics if you can, and let's just have a quick conversation. What did you hear? What resonated with you in any of the folks who were speaking there? Anything speak to you?
Just getting out and talking to people.
Just getting out and talking to people, right? Don't overthink it too much. Just getting out and talk to people. All right. What else?
The videos, I'm encouraged. David Radney's been encouraging me to do a lot of videos to talk, you know, and so I hear him saying, you know, the videos, that's just validates that that's important to do.
You know, and I'll tell you something. One of the things that I love about videos, well, there's a couple things, but one of the things is that they're super easy. You know, you don't have to have a whole production studio. If you've got a smartphone, when you go to open up your camera, there's a video setting on it. And you just open it up, you turn on the video, you reverse the camera, so instead of pointing out, it points at you and you record. and you record just a 30-second video. Hey, I was thinking about you today. It's Hal. Just wanted to introduce myself in person. Whatever it is, once you've recorded that little snippet, there's a little button on your video that you can say send, and you can send it as a text. You can send it as an email. The point is, it's super, super easy. And people resonate differently when they see a face, when they see a video, right? Super easy to do. And I'm telling you, it sets you apart. It sets you apart because not a lot of folks do video, right? So I love that idea. And I know that David has been pushing that for a while. What else? I see open houses in the chat box. Bonnie had thrown open houses. You know, what you're going to see in Ignite is that we're going to focus, especially in Sparks, we're going to focus on two key areas in terms of lead generation. We're going to focus on, well, I got a little background noise. Whoever is talking in the background, please mute yourself. We're going to focus on your database and relationships that you already have. And we are going to focus more on open houses. What we've learned in doing Ignite through the years is of all the different things that you can do to get people into the top of your funnel, open houses is time and time again proving to be the most effective for most agents. And what you also heard, or what I also heard in that video, was that I'm going to mute y'all guys because there's a little background noise here, and then you can unmute yourself as you want to have something to add. What I heard in that video, and what I've learned to be true myself as a coach and as an agent, is that probably the least effective form of lead generation is the cold call. And when I'm talking about the cold call, I mean the purely cold call. Just randomly out of the blue, somebody that has no idea who you are, why you're calling. Those are ridiculously low converting. And they should probably be the lead generation tactic of last resort. There's a lot of things that you probably can and probably should do before you do the cold call. Now, you can warm up that call, right? You can warm that up through your marketing. If people have been receiving my marketing, they can be a little bit warmer when I call them. I can warm them up by having somebody that perhaps has never spoken to me before, but I know that they have interest in real estate because maybe they're trying to sell their home for sale by owner. Maybe they tried to sell their home as it's expired. That's not quite as cold a cold call. But what else did you hear? Lots of other things to unpack here. Let's go back to that very first woman who talked about focusing on military families. What was she, anything jump out in terms of what she was talking about? And you're all muted again now, so I'd ask you to unmute if you want to jump in or throw in the chat box.
She was doing something very hyper local. That was her, you know, instead of being all over the place, she focused on one thing.
Yeah, she was. And you know what? I'm glad you heard that, because that is the differentiator. What you're going to find is that agents who build the biggest businesses do it in the smallest niches. It is so counterintuitive. Mm-hmm. And I remember about a year ago, I was teaching in the Fort Lee Market Center, and there was a new agent coming in and a more experienced agent who meant well, but said to her, look, because you're new and you don't really know who needs you yet, you kind of have to be a jack of all trades. You've got to be able to do a little bit of commercial. You got to be able to do a little bit of residential. You've got to be able to serve people all across Bergen and Hudson County, because you never know where those leads are going to come from. And while I know he meant well, there was no worse advice that you could ever give a new agent than to ask them to try to spread out that broadly. Where you build momentum is to pick a couple of lanes and to go deeper in those lanes. Gary Vaynerchuk, if you know the great Gary Vaynerchuk, right? He says it all the time, that people should go deeper and they want to go wider all the time. But they need to go deeper and deeper into their niche. There's riches in the niches, and hyper-local in terms of geographics is the winning formula for agents. I haven't put it into this curriculum. I've put it in some others, but one of the things that I've done time and time again is I've looked at Brokermetrics reports of top agents by MLS. And I've done this for the New Jersey MLS. I've done this for the Garden State MLS. I've done this for Trend. And when you really dig in to where the top agents do their business, if you look at the top 5 agents in any market, and top 5 based on unit volume, and then you dig into where are they doing those units. And top 5 in an MLS right now probably puts you in the range of 150 or more units per person. And some of those are teams, I get that. But when you really dig into where they're doing it, what you find invariably is 40 to 60% of the business is done in only one town, maybe two. They don't try to focus on Bergen County. They pick a lane, they pick a town, and they go super deep in those towns. Sue Adler, the #1 agent by unit count in the Garden State MLS. She does 50% of her business in only two towns, and they're Chatham and Summit. And then if you add the third town, which is, I believe, Madison for her, now you're accounting for almost 70% of her business. She's not trying to cover everywhere. She's just trying to go deep and hyper local. And my recommendation for you is to decide where that's going to be for you. It should be based on geographics, right? But where and why? And we'll talk about that in other modules here in terms of farming and building that out. But hyper local is a really, 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 really important point.
And also becoming an expert in that, because you can't be an expert in every single town.
And that's yeah, you can't. And here's the thing, there's a lot of choice out there. There are thousands and thousands of agents to choose from. And so people want somebody who's an expert. And because you can't be an expert in everything, you got to pick a lane, hyper local. What else did you hear in that video? We're going to spend a few more minutes unpacking this before we move on. What else resonated? I see in the chat box, build relationships with people, for sure, right? Build relationships. How did you hear different people talking about the methodology of how they built those relationships? What were they doing?
Like care calls, you mean?
Well,
like today is a perfect example of building a relationship. I sold this house 3 years ago, and I'm still in touch with this past client and having lunch with her. If I had never followed up or checked in and build that relationship, we wouldn't probably begin together today or getting referrals from her.
You heard a lot of people say follow up, follow up, follow up, didn't you? That everybody said it's in the follow up. And you heard different people saying what they were doing to nurture relationships. You heard people talking about events.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing things, inviting people in, and it wasn't always super salesy. Sometimes it was a happy hour, sometimes it was a whatever, but it was just a way to kind of nurture that relationship and let people know that they were important to you, right? And so lead generation, when we really think about it, we're always thinking we so quickly default to lead generation equals cold call, right? There was a woman in here in that video somewhere who said, I really believed that lead generation was cold calling, and I wasn't particularly interested in that. I was afraid of that. And I know for a fact, even in this group, we've got 24 people in this group. I know for a fact that probably 22 of you would rather get hit in the head with a brick than just pick up the phone and cold call. And there's a very, very small percentage of the population that really gets jazzed up by the game and the chase of cold calling. It's a very, very specific mix of behavioral styles that enjoys that. We have a specific name for those folks in real estate. We call them freaks, but no, but most of us do much better just nurturing relationships, right? You heard people say, there's so many things that you can do. What you really need to do is find out what works for you. What works for you? And then double down on that. What we talk about a lot in lead gen, and I spend a lot of time as a coach, is to start to say, look, let's play a little bit with different things and let's figure out what you're good at. And based on your behavioral style and your natural style, I can probably guess a little bit about what kinds of lead generation activities are going to be better for you. If you are an outgoing, a high I, a sort of person who's out there and loves to be the center of attention, then networking things like open houses and networking events are right into your wheelhouse. If you're a high D, the driver, then and you don't really care a whole heck of a lot about what people think, you let it roll right off your back, then for sale by owners and expireds could be really good for you. If you're a high C, a detail-oriented but cautious person, then you may find that newsletters and providing information that you curate as a way of building relationships is a better play for you. The game of lead gen is to try to figure out what's your natural style, what's your temperament leading you to do, and then really, really becoming an expert in that. Too many times we look at people and say, that person is killing it by doing this kind of a lead generation technique, and so I just need to do that and I'll kill it too. Well, if that's not your temperament, you're not gonna. Because somebody put in here, get out of your comfort zone. Angela, you are spot on. The magic happens. A friend of mine gave me a coffee mug that said the magic happens outside of your comfort zone. And while that's true, the magic never will happen outside of your skill set. And keep that in mind, because if you're going outside of your comfort zone and what's making it uncomfortable is you're doing something that you don't do well, there's no magic there for you. All you're going to have there is stress, right? You've got to get outside of your comfort zone, but you've got to stay within your skill set or your temperament. Anything else that you heard there before we move on? I just want to take one more thought or two more thoughts if anybody has them before we move on. Things that you heard in there that kind of resonated with you. I heard a lot about scripts. We're going to do a module, I think, next or the second one after this that talks about scripts. And I'm a huge fan of scripted language. I've shared this story in other classes, and I'll just use this thought out there. When I was pre-real estate, my original degree, I was actually licensed as a psychotherapist, and spent about 12 years with a clinical practice, also specializing as a medical family therapist, which led me into hospice care, which led me into healthcare administration. But I got out of that world. And when I got into real estate sales, I really had a chip on my shoulder. I felt like, you know what, I don't need to be scripted. I know how to have a conversation. I was trained as a clinician with postmasters training on how to really listen and guide people through conversations. And one of my therapist friends said to me, you know, devil's advocate, he says, you know, when you're in a treatment session and you had a family that was just stuck, you know, and they were just kind of in this pattern that wasn't helping anybody, did you know what you would say to cause them to see things differently so that they could be freed up to take different actions? And I said, of course I did. I mean, that's what you go to training for. That's why you go through institute training and you do all the practice behind the one-way mirrors and all that stuff. And he said, dummy, that's a script. Scripts are nothing more than specific language that's designed to allow people to see things differently so they can make different choices and be empowered to behave differently. And once that light bulb went on in my head, I recognized that scripted language isn't about programming you to sound like a robot. Scripted language is about knowing what to say when things come up. And to be fair, a lot of people said in that video, I learned a script, I understand where it's going, and then I kind of use my own words for that. And I think that you can do that a lot of times. You know, you can. A lot of times what happens with scripts is they're just sort of ideas, and we know where to take the conversation with confidence when this situation comes up or that situation comes up. But I will tell you that when you really become a student of neurolinguistics, and maybe this is because I'm a therapist by training, but the specific words that you use and the way that you use them can be really important. When you think about scripts, you sometimes hear people talking about scripts, and we think about scripts in a play. You say this line, I say that line. I like to think about scripts the same way that we think about prescription medicine. You use the same word. You go to the doctor, you're not feeling well. The doctor writes you a script. You go to the pharmacy, they fill a script. And inside that capsule is an active ingredient that's going to cause you to get better. And it's contained inside a whole lot of inactive stuff. A lot of our conversations are the inactive stuff, and they don't have to be precise. But at certain moments, certain key things have to be said in prescribed ways if we're really going to have impact. And you heard every single person or several of those people in those videos just say, look, when I realized how important the scripts were and I allowed myself to learn the scripts and practice the scripts and get good with the scripts, that's when things changed. We're going to talk about scripts, right? So the lead gen video, I love that video, and we will move on here. But I love that video because I just think, and I'm going to go back again to David Blaine and Rookie of the Year, 80 units in his first year. And what he's telling you is, look at my playbook. This is how I'm doing it. I'm meeting people. I'm talking to people. I'm being scripted. I'm getting out there, and I'm staying within my comfort zone, right? I'm staying not in my comfort zone. I'm staying inside my skill set. I'm doing the thing that I do well. And just because somebody else can do something else well, doesn't mean it should be the thing for me, right? Any other questions on that before we move on? And we are going to move on because it's 11:45.
Cal, I have a question.
Bring it on. I'm not afraid.
Okay. I just wanted to know how, or if you maybe would think this is a challenge too, but as a new agent, and I don't know if you would include this in a script or not, but you know, do you tell people, you know, I'm squeaky clean behind the ears, you know, not necessarily you would say that, but, you know, I'm new. So a lot of people, at least I know I wouldn't want to go with a rookie in a huge transaction. I would want to go with somebody more seasoned and experienced. So how do you overcome that challenge of, you know, when you're meeting people and you're networking, you know, you are going to disclose that I am new to the business.
You know, here's the thing, Noel, you hit it right on the head. Nobody wants to be the cardiac surgeon's very first bypass, right? You're like, wait, what? You've never done this before? And because when it matters, you want a pro. And everybody's new at one time. But here's the difference. In medicine, the cardiac surgeon who's doing his first bypass is not doing it by himself. There are other people in the surgical suite with more experience. And I think that's kind of what you have to lean on here, is because the truth of the matter is you can't make it up. People can find out. It's easy enough to figure out how much volume you've done. And the bottom line is if they press you and say, how many of these have you done? You can't, you know, how long you've been in real estate? I was taught to say, it feels like forever. And probably 70% of the time, people would laugh and they would move on. They just felt that they needed to ask that question. But the truth is, if they're like, hey, cool answer, but how long have you really been doing this? I can't lie to them. And so I do really believe that what you do is you let people know, you know, truth be told right now, I'm newer to the business and this actually is my very first listing. And here's why that's a benefit to you. What we have to do is reframe that. We've got to take something that on its face could be seen as a deficit and turn it into an opportunity. Here's how that benefits you. Because I'm newer, I don't have any other people competing for my time. Because I'm newer, I don't have any other listings. You know, if you list with Mary, who's got 14 listings in town, and she generates a buyer lead, which one of those listings is she going to be loyal to? Whose property is she going to show? I generate a lead. You're the only one I've got. I can do a much better job of bringing all of the buyer leads. And because I'm newer, I have a whole team behind me. I happen to be part of the #1 brokerage in town, and we happen to be #1 for a reason. And I've got a team leader, and I've got a coach, and I'm part of a group, and I've got lots of different people behind me. You don't just get me, you get all of us, right? It's just, you think about how you turn that on its head. And that's how I go after it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's move along here. Database, right? Lead generation is the core of your business. And when you get people in the next phase in the models, we put them into the database. And this is not a KW Command class, but I want a quick show of hands, either in the chat box. In fact, that's probably the easiest way to do this. How many people have not yet put anyone in their KW Command database? I'm going to assume that you have. And if you've not, that's who I want to and there's no judgment, or maybe you might not even have it yet. Some of you are so new that you don't even have Command yet. But
I have not.
Not put somebody, okay, who is that?
Andrew.
Okay, Andrew, you haven't yet. And so what I'll tell you is...
That will probably change today, though.
Good. So this isn't really a class where I'm going to go into Command and teach you how to do that. But what I am going to say is there's plenty of resources, and a couple of resources that I'm going to point you to. One is, if you go to YouTube, and I'm going to do it right now, if you go to YouTube, and I want you to get familiar with what we call the 66-day challenge. And I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Do you see my YouTube channel right here? So Marty Miller is a KW coach out of Houston, and he's created this sort of 66 videos here called the KW Command 66-Day Challenge, and it is version 3.0 because as Command has evolved through the years, there's been different versions of this that's come out. But in the right-hand side of the margin here are all the different little snippet videos. And what I love about this is, you know, we have some really, really great in-house training on Command. Elise and Reese and Chris Gareffa and all those folks, they do an awesome job, and they're available to you. But one of the things that happens is this is pre-recorded and it's right online. And these are just little snippets of 6 or 8 minutes specific to a specific task. If I wanted to learn how do I add somebody to Command, I can just go right here, learn how to do it, and then practice it myself, right? So this is a terrific resource, as are the videos in the Keller Williams Facebook group and the Bergen County Partners Facebook group and the YouTube channel where we've recorded all that sort of stuff. But getting people into your database, right? I'm going to stop that share. I'm going to get back to the PowerPoint here. Getting people into your database is the key, right? And so super, super important that we do that. Now, let me just make sure of where I am here. I want to get this PowerPoint back up and get it shared with you again. Can you guys see? Let me just see. Can you see the PowerPoint again? Somebody just call out and let me know where we are. I have so many windows open right now. Do you see the database?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're going to get people into the database, and what a database is, it is the bucket that stores the information. But the beauty of our database here is when you put people into the database, it's not just a collection of names and contact information. It's a tool that actually helps you to nurture the relationships here, and it becomes a lead generation tool. Emily's saying that she's watched the 66-day challenge in YouTube and it's been helpful. Yeah, I keep going back to that as well, Emily. I think it's a great resource. You know, the beauty of having your database, and when you're working your database, and we're going to talk about smart plans, is a lot of this can be automated. And in the automation, it allows you to do it consistently. There's no separation for a real relationship. You can never automate a real relationship. However, through the combination of automated touches and touches that are not automated that you actually initiate, you begin to nurture these relationships, and that leads to predictable lead flow, and that leads to predictable transaction volume. The beauty of having a database and working your database, and we're going to do a whole module on that in another couple sessions, is it actually becomes your best source of lead generation. About 80% of all the transactions that are done typically are done with people that already had a pre-existing relationship with their agent. Either they used them as a past customer, or they were familiar with them in their marketing and prospecting, or they were referred by a friend, but they weren't strangers, right? And so getting people into your database, and once they're in your database, what we do is we have to recognize that there's two levels here in the database. We call some of those leads, and leads, the way we're defining it, are I have legitimate good contact information, but I don't really have a two-way dialogue yet. I'm sending you information, you're not getting back to me yet. A lead could be somebody that I met at an open house and they gave me their contact information and I followed up with them, but I haven't heard back yet. When we start a two-way conversation is when we call them contacts, right? And you're going to have both leads and contacts in your database. In the old language of the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book that Gary Keller wrote back in 2004, we refer to them as METs, people that you have met and have a relationship with and you know who they are, and then people that you haven't met yet, but you know who they are. And they meet the profile of who would be a good client for you, right? We've changed that language to leads and contacts. In the way that we convert a lead to a contact is we put them on a touch campaign that follows up with them 19 times a year. And again, we're going to do a deep dive on this in another day, so I'm not going to go deep into it here. But 19 times over the course of the year, providing value so that they don't unsubscribe, providing value that they determine is valuable to them, not we determine it's valuable for them. So we have to be thoughtful about what we send. But 19 times a year, what will begin to happen is that's about what it takes for people to begin to engage and have two-way conversations. And once we've done that, we put them on a combination of touches that leads to 36 touches over the course of the year. And that would be about 3 times a month. And some of you are asking, at what time do the police show up and accuse you of stalking these poor folks? That I'm not asking you to be a creepy stalker. But what I am asking you to do is to have a high level of engagement, and we're going to go through it on another day. But it's a combination of touches that are text messages and Facebook messages and emails and telephone calls and so many different ways that we touch them that it doesn't feel so creepy, right? It doesn't feel so smothering. And once you get them in your database and put them on a touch campaign, right, there's a lot of different ways that we're going to manage that by tagging them. Tagging them allows us to put them into groups that make sense. People that I've met at open houses could be one cluster. People that are interested in buying a home in Leonia could be another cluster. However you choose to segment your database through tags is something that you're going to need to learn how to do, right? These custom tags, you can make them different colors for ease of use. All these different things that we're going to do a deeper dive on 2 more sessions down the line. I'm just running through those real quick here to show you what they are, because what begins to happen then as we nurture and we put the people in the database and we nurture them through these smart plans, what begins to happen is some of them are going to raise their hand. We know about 6% of the population every year is going to be involved in a real estate action. Some of them are going to be there, raise their hand and say, I'm that guy. We're going to then call those opportunities. And now they move into this part of the sales pipeline. And sales pipeline management, again, we'll do another class on it. Ignite runs for 18 sessions. Sales pipeline management is probably the one piece of real estate, of sales skills that we don't teach well in this industry, in my estimation, because nurturing people along and getting them to move through this pipeline and get closer and closer and closer to do business with us is a known skill set. And there's tasks, it's a science. We can teach you how to do it. I'm a big fan of Jeb Blount. Blount is his last name. First name Jeb, like Jeb Bush, right? He probably has about 6 books on my bookshelf. He's probably written closer to 15. But Fanatical Prospecting is one of his books where he really teaches, how do you manage your sales pipeline? How do you move people through the process and get them to get closer and closer and closer to doing business and doing it with you? There's a science to it. And in Command, we've given you the tool. We've given you the tool because we're going to call that opportunities. And once you put that client into the opportunities part of your pipeline, now you're going to be able to kind of nurture those next steps. And again, we'll do a class on that, a separate class on that. But it all starts right at the top with lead generation. It all starts with recognizing that unless I have leads, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. I could be the very, very best chef in the world. If nobody comes to my restaurant, it doesn't matter. And so we get so caught up on making sure that we deliver a world-class experience, and we've developed all the skills to be the best of the best. And make no mistake, you got to be good at what you do or you're not going to stay in business. But if you don't make lead generation the cornerstone of your business, you're fooling yourself, because you're not even in business yet until you've got leads to work with, right? So we start Sparks with lead generation as the core of your business, because that's where it all begins. And in fact, when Ignite finishes, the next series that we move on to always after Ignite becomes a whole course on lead generation. It's called Lead Generation 36-12-3. And the abbreviation stands for what would need to happen for me to generate 36 transactions in 12 months with 3 hours a day of focused lead generation. And a lot of times people say, I'm new, I can't do 36 transactions. I look at the top agents in my office and some of them aren't even doing 36 transactions. And I point you back to David Blaine, who is the last guy in the video who in his first year in the business did close to 80. And so if David can do it, anybody can do it, right? It's like the first time that somebody broke the 4-minute mile. Everybody thought that you could never run a mile in less than 4 minutes. Your heart would explode if you ran that fast. And the moment that somebody else finally broke through that mark and really proved that it could be done, then that record didn't stand for very long. Then lots of people broke it, right? So the point of the matter is, it's possible. It's out there. We know the pathway. We know how to do it. It all starts with lead generation. In the last 2 minutes that we've got here, I'm going to ask for ahas, right? And just so you're clear, every class that I teach, I'm going to ask for ahas. So take some notes. And what an aha is anything that resonated with you today, any light bulb moment that you heard about today, or something that causes you to think differently than you did before we started, or an idea that you're going to put into place after this conversation today. Any ahas?
To figure out.
Sorry, Andrew. I keep interrupting.
No, go ahead. You go first.
The Zoom etiquette. I love it. Go ahead.
For me, is really the follow-up. I need to really work on that and do a better job with smart plans, which, you know, creating my own smart plans. That's what I'm working on and putting people on that campaign.
Just a little sidebar on this. You're not alone.
I
I will tell you that lead follow-up is a bigger problem for most agents than lead generation. In fact, it's so much bigger than lead generation that companies like Zillow and Realtor.com will do that lead follow-up for you for a fee. Realtor.com, in fact, recognized that they were generating leads and sending leads to agents, and agents weren't converting them, and they were getting frustrated. And so what they did is they went out and bought 2 years ago, in August of 2018, they went out and bought a company called OpCity for something like, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was tens and tens and millions of dollars that they spent to hire a company, to buy a company that would percolate these leads and follow up on these leads until they were actually hot enough that they could hand them over and the agent wouldn't screw it up. Lead follow-up is the industry's biggest challenge. So you're in good company, right? As long as you know that and you have a strategy and say, this is what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to work on my smart plans, right? That's a good start, right? Somebody else, who else jumped in before there?
That was me, Andrew. I think you said that top agents tend to have one town or two towns that they really focus hard on and get the majority of their business from.
That is a real eye opener, and it's so counterintuitive. We think we need to spread out and we need to be able to. Now, the truth is, and here's what I want to just clarify around that. If your database, if you're building your database the way we're describing, and somebody calls up in your database and says, you know what, Andrew, my brother's thinking about selling his house. It's in Hackensack. Would you list it? And that's not your target town. Don't say no. If it makes sense, do the business. Your database doesn't know which communities you're focusing on, nor do they really care. So what I'm not saying is don't ever take business outside of your geographic area that you've determined. What I am saying, though, is when you're doing lead generation, when you're blocking time to generate leads, don't try to generate leads outside of that footprint. Use prospecting and marketing, but stay inside of that footprint. Your database will give you opportunities outside. Take the ones that make sense, refer the ones that don't make sense. But lead generation inside a defined market area where you're marketing and creating a background awareness of who you are, preparing the soil so that when you show up in your prospecting, you will convert at a much higher level. That always, always, always proves to be a better strategy than just scattergunning all over the county. And the top agents know that. That's why they're the top agents, right? The trick is figuring out where is it going to be for you and why, right?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
All right, guys, it's 12:02. We're a couple minutes over. I appreciate you all for being on today. We're going to wrap it up here. I'll let you go. This will be posted up on the Bergen County Partners YouTube channel a little bit later on today if you want to come back and see any of it again. But we're going to come back on, what's today? Today's Wednesday. On Friday, the next module is on scripted language, right? I told you we were going to talk about scripts, and we're going to spend a whole module on it on Friday about the importance of scripts and how to use them. So come on back and join us there. And I'll see you all soon. Have a good day, guys.